Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Monday morning. I'd like to call this voting meeting of the House. Oh, 1 second. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for the change in schedule this morning due to some travel delays. I would like to call this meeting of the House Energy Committee to order at 10:03. Nick, will you please call the roll?
Chair Fiedler.
Here.
Representative Boyd.
On leave.
Representative Brown.
On leave.
Representative Serrato.
On leave.
Representative Davidson.
On leave.
Representative Donahue.
On leave.
Representative Friel.
Thank you.
Representative Dural.
On leave.
Representative Ingalls.
On leave.
Representative McAndrew.
On leave.
Representative Pielli. Representative Rusnock.
On leave.
Representative Steele.
On leave.
Representative Venkat.
Here.
Chair Causer.
Here.
Representative Armanini.
Here.
Representative Barton.
On leave.
Representative Cook. Representative Ham.
He is online.
Online.
Representative Kale.
On leave.
Representative Kephart.
Here.
Representative Mihalik.
On leave.
Representative Rapp. Here. Representative Stambaugh.
Here.
Representative Warner.
On leave.
Representative Williams. Here. Attendance is recorded. Proceed, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to our members, testifiers, and guests for attending today's public hearing of House Bill 2151, printers number 2778, sponsored by Representative Donahue, who will be joining us in a moment, and House Bill 2150, printers number 2777, sponsored by Representative Kyle Mullins. We have a packed agenda for this hearing, so I will say just briefly that we've all heard from residents in our districts about data center developments, with people, I think, expressing a wide variety of concerns and asking a wide variety of questions. Today, we have two proposals in front of us that I believe may help us put in place guardrails and increase transparency for these projects. In addition to these specific projects, we are, of course, facing an energy affordability crisis and a looming, if not here, crisis of energy reliability. I know a lot of people who are struggling to pay their bills right now. And I believe one of the jobs of this committee is to do everything we can to keep people's bills down, to ensure the heat and the lights come on when folks need them, and to protect human health and natural environment at every step. That is a lot, but I believe that is the task of this committee and what we must tackle. That said, while there are many related issues, I ask that testimony and conversation today focus on the two bills at hand. Joining us now in person for the record is Representative Kyle Donahue. Chair Causer, do you have any opening remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know there are a number of questions and concerns with the bills in front of us, so I look forward to the testimony today, and thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Our committee member, Representative Kyle Donahue, is, as I said, the prime sponsor of House Bill 2151. Representative, would you like to offer brief remarks before we hear testimony on the bill?
Thank you, Chair. In my district in the Northeast and many districts near me, data center developers are proposing projects, some quite large, and there's tremendous concern on the part of residents. In Pennsylvania, municipalities have sole authority on zoning issues. However, by having the Center for Local Government Services create a model ordinance and offer technical support, I believe we can make it easier for boroughs and municipalities to protect their communities from data center impacts. It's important to note that this ordinance is entirely optional. It's just a starting point for boroughs and townships that might not have the technical expertise. It is not mandatory whatsoever. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but it offers practical support and flexibility that I believe will help local officials save time, reduce confusion, and help communities move forward with confidence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Joining us in person is Representative Giral as well. If today's testifiers could please take their seats up here in the hot seats on the panel for House Bill 2151, we have 4 testifiers joining us. Ron Grutza, Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Boroughs Association. Holly Fischel, Director of Policy and Research for the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. Pat McDonald, President and CEO of Penn Future. And Dan Diorio, Vice President for State Policy at the Data Center Coalition. Thank you all so much for joining us here on a Monday morning. We appreciate your time. Please know that members already have your written testimony in their packets and have many questions for you, I am sure. We will hold all questions until after your testimony is complete. Today, we will start with Mr. Grutza. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler and Chairman Causer and members of the House Energy Committee. My name is Ron Grutza, Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania State Association of Boroughs. Our association represents over 900 borough governments and thousands of elected and appointed officials across the state. So I'm pleased to be here on behalf of those members to give some perspective on House Bill 2151, which would task the DCED with creating a model ordinance for data center for land use regulations by municipalities. Of course, we all know why there is a proliferation of data center projects throughout the state and throughout the country. Projected by 2030, there's going to be a projection of about $7 trillion globally for data center build out. So our municipalities need to be ready for this. And in fact, our municipalities have been working on providing the some type of regulation, whether it be placement of what districts these data centers would be in, and of course standards for those developments. Let me just quickly give a little bit of shout out. I know Representative Donahue gave an important nod to local control with land use development. That is something that is one of the cornerstones of local government here in Pennsylvania. Of course, it's optional to have that land use regulation. A lot of municipalities do have that. Some do not. Some are covered by the county. But it's an important role in preserving community character, ensuring orderly development, and protecting property values, safeguarding public safety, and ensuring public participation in what kind of character your community is. So municipalities, as I said, have been out on the forefront of receiving these data center proposals. Most of the development that we've seen are in the townships, but we have seen some boroughs receive those as well, of course, particularly in the Northeast. So they have been quick to try to get out in front of that, to amend their land use and zoning and saldos to provide for a use, because of course we cannot restrict, totally ban certain types of uses in our municipalities or multi-municipality, because that's exclusionary zoning and that's illegal. But what municipalities can do is provide for a use like a data center, and like I said before, say where you would like that to go in your municipality, if it's your industrial, your commercial districts, and then what type of parameters and standards you want for setbacks, landscaping, a lot of things that are in House Bill 2151. So we would like to thank Representative Donahue for his leadership on this issue and proposing House Bill 2151. We think that DCED is a very well equipped to handle a model ordinance such as this. I would say that we have worked in the past with state agencies to come up with other model ordinances. Our members use model ordinances all the time. In the past, we've worked with DEP on model solar ordinances, wind model ordinances. We've worked with DEP on model wood-fired boiler ordinances. And so our members take that and we can, it just streamlines the process of coming up with that. Of course, having a zoning ordinance is not a cheap proposition. Having a ready-to-go standard with a lot of different options in it could go a long way in incentivizing municipalities to get out in front of this and not be caught without the particular use for a data center. So that's really important that we make sure that municipalities do plan for this particular use, because the consequences could be a little bit, as was said, there's a lot of questions from citizens, so you don't want to be in that situation. Some of the recommendations, we do fully support House Bill 2151. We think that it would provide an important tool for municipalities to proactively plan for data centers. We just suggest that you give multiple options in the bill for different districts or different types of just different options for municipalities. Of course, with the complexity of zoning, you can't really use a cookie cutter approach, so different options would be helpful. And of course, just to clarify in the bill, we'd appreciate just some language that it is totally optional, and municipalities are not required to do that. And we do appreciate that local decision-making being paramount here in Pennsylvania. So for these reasons, we ask you to please support House Bill 2151, and I'd be happy to answer any questions after the panel's through. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your remarks. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Fischel. You may begin.
Thank you. Chair Fiedler, Chair Kauser, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present remarks on behalf of the 1,453 townships of the second class represented by our association. My name is Holly Fischel, and I'm the Policy and Research Director for PSATS, Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization committed to preserving and strengthening township government. Over the last year, data centers have become a fast emerging topic of media and public interest as a land use, and township governments have been at the forefront of this discussion. Township officials have rolled up their sleeves to learn about the expanded use and update land use ordinances with the input of their residents to determine the most appropriate locations for these facilities and to mitigate negative impacts. The considerations on page 2 of House Bill 2151 reflect language we have seen in township ordinances. While we understand the intent of the bill is to provide a resource, we do not believe that the legislation is necessary any longer. Perhaps a year ago it would have been a different answer, but townships are already updating their land use ordinances to incorporate data centers, and many have completed this process. Under the municipality's planning code, each municipality with zoning, as Ron had mentioned, must provide for every use within their borders or within the area of a multi-municipal comprehensive plan between the municipality and its neighbors. If a municipality fails to provide for a new use and receives an application for that use, the developer has an option to use the developer curative amendment process to force that unplanned use in its desired area of the township or area of the multi-municipal plan. As such, it is imperative that zoning ordinances be promptly updated when a new or expanded use is known. As a member resource organization, PSATS promptly and routinely communicates new uses to our members and works to help our members share their experiences, best practices, and impacts to mitigate those impacts through training, sample ordinance language, and newsletter and magazine articles. We've included partners from the industry and oversight agencies, such as Basin Commissions in our training and communications. Municipalities must follow a strict public process when adopting new land use ordinances or amending existing ones, including public notices, public hearings, and consideration and action at public meetings, with an opportunity for public input throughout that process. In addition, land use approval processes are strictly regulated by state law, and failure to act timely results in deemed approvals. The Governor's Center for Local Government Services historically served as a resource for local governments for planning and land use issues, and we do applaud their return to this venture. We believe the center can certainly serve as a resource now on data center concerns and share language from our website and operational ordinances already in place that may be helpful as a municipality works to review and update its ordinances. As time is of the essence, a model ordinance provided 6 months after adoption of the legislation would be far too late, as well as a great duplication of effort. PSATS is concerned that placing this directive into the MPC to create a model ordinance will also create the appearance of a state-approved one-size-fits-all land use provisions for data centers, even with the optional language. Our association strongly opposes any type of mandatory state-directed land use provisions, and as such must oppose HB 2151. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you so much. Mr. McDonald, you may go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, and members of the committee, and thanks for the opportunity to provide testimony today. My name is Pat McDonald. I'm the President and CEO of Penn Future. Penn Future is a statewide environmental advocacy nonprofit. We envision a Commonwealth in which all people enjoy a stable climate, clean air, and pure water. And what brings me here today is the potential proliferation of data centers in Pennsylvania and the impact that this can have on residents and communities across the Commonwealth. Like any large-scale land use, data centers have potential benefits and drawbacks. They may create jobs, bring in tax revenue, but they can also cause significant environmental and quality of life issues if not cited and regulated properly. There are three major concerns with data centers from an environmental perspective: impervious coverage, water usage, and power usage. Municipalities, as we heard, are responsible for controlling where and how land is used in Pennsylvania and are the first line of defense when it comes to ensuring data center development happens responsibly. Pennsylvania recently saw numerous consequences when municipalities were caught unprepared for exploding demand for land with the rise of large-scale warehouses and distribution centers. Many municipalities had to move very quickly to update their relevant zoning ordinances to balance economic development opportunities those facilities brought with communities' health, safety, and welfare. The boom in e-commerce and logistics demonstrated that municipalities must be prepared to address development before a project is identified. Building on its work around warehouses and distribution centers and anticipating the challenges presented by data centers, Penn Future created a model or local ordinance to assist municipal officials in planning ahead for potential development. HB 2150, sponsored by Representative Donahue, is a common sense proposal to provide an important tool to assist municipalities and help ensure data centers are sited responsibly within Pennsylvania and minimize negative impact on residents. Model ordinances are a tool designed to help speed up the process of drafting an ordinance. A municipality can adopt the whole ordinance, word for word, directly into their existing ordinance, or it can adopt sections of it while keeping the rest of their existing ordinance the same. We understand that an amendment to the legislation will be considered that would in part ensure public participation in the development of the model ordinance and any subsequent updates. This addition would help ensure stakeholders are included in the process and have been provided with fair opportunity to weigh in on the product that will ultimately be created. We recommend that the committee adopt the proposed amendment. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide testimony on the legislation and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us again. And Mr. DiOrio, thank you also for being here again. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Dan DiOrio. I'm Vice President of State Policy for the Data Center Coalition. DCC is the National Membership Association for the Data Center Industry, representing leading data center owners and operators, as well as companies that lease large amounts of data center capacity. I'd like to thank Rep. Donahue for his interest in this issue. The data center industry is committed to being a responsible partner in the communities where they locate, but also a responsive partner in those communities. Data centers closely consult with local leaders, energy and water providers, and other stakeholders to ensure projects meet the economic development and other needs of the communities. Data center companies cite projects where they are permitted under local zoning ordinances, rules, and regulations which are developed by local leaders representing their communities. As the industry invests hundreds of billions of dollars in communities across the country, our members are committed to continued community engagement and stakeholder education about the data center industry, and to working collaboratively with policymakers and regulatory bodies at every level as they strive to make informed and fact-based decisions on behalf of their constituencies. We have some concerns with the current language in HB 2151. First, a key part in establishing effective recommendations under the bill is ensuring robust and balanced stakeholder input. The data center industry brings decades of experience and expertise to policies that can foster effective development while addressing a wide range of concerns such as those outlined in the bill. DCC strongly recommends that HB 2151 explicitly directs the Center for Local Government Services to conduct a robust stakeholder process with representatives from various stakeholder groups, including the data center industry. Second, the current direction given to the center points to regulating data centers and mitigating community impacts, which implies a focus on restricting digital infrastructure development and operations. We recommend that clear legislative direction is given to the center to focus on recommended solutions that balance responsible economic growth and development while addressing local considerations and mitigating concerns. Lastly, each community is different, and as others have said on the panel, we recommend that HB 2151 should explicitly state the model ordinance is designated as suggestions for consideration by local governments rather than mandatory requirements across all jurisdictions. The data center industry looks forward to continued engagement as a collaborative partner and resource for state policymakers and to ensure Pennsylvania remains a strong and growing data center market. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists again for being here. Joining us online is Representative Boyd and Representative Rusnak. Mr. Grutza, if I could ask you just to, my question, and I'll try to keep it brief because I know there are many. We've talked about this being optional, being a resource, this being something that local officials could use. I think you said all, some, or none. Could you talk about that and just a little bit about the role of municipal officials, all the things that they need to handle, the variety of issues, and any way in which you think this could be helpful or you'd like to see it changed? Thank you.
Sure. Basically, what we like to see is options for our municipalities. And we don't like to see is legislation coming down from Harrisburg dictating exactly what kind of standards need to be in our land use planning for our communities. So it's all about local decision making. And I think that having a tool such as a model ordinance from a state agency like DCED, of course, with the Governor's Center for Local Government Services, with the recent investment into planning, I think that really they could take a look at and see exactly which of the parameters have been adopted already by municipalities, or since it's really a changing, a fluid time with technology, et cetera, even in water and different types of cooling, maybe we need to look at some other things for municipalities, say that have already enacted these, that maybe they need to consider an amendment to that. So I think that something where you have a state agency that's looking at it, that's going to look at it annually, I think that that is a benefit to our municipalities.
Thank you. Chairman Causer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The one thing that's very apparent is we have a really diverse Commonwealth. From one corner to the other, it's very different from my area, Representative Rapp's area, to the other corner of the state. Very diverse, different issues, different population levels. As I look at this bill, it doesn't happen often where we have local government organizations that might be taking a different perspective on these bills, because often you're on the same page on these bills. The thing that comes to mind for me is the local decision-making is critical. And when I look at where this model ordinance may come from DCED, the first thing that comes to mind for me is this is an administration that also wants to enact a citing board to take away all local government decision-making from local officials. Now we're going to have them develop a model ordinance, and what's going to be in the model ordinance? Where are they going to take input from? That's very concerning to me. And I guess my question for our local government representatives is, what are you hearing from your members now? I know when I was a township supervisor, if we were looking at an issue, the first thing we did was call PSATs and ask what other municipalities were dealing with, what ordinances across the state might be enacted. So what specifically are you folks hearing from your local governments on this issue?
Sure, thank you. I mean, we've been having outreaches for over a year now from our members, just trying to figure out what others have been doing. We did a lot of, again, trying to do our due diligence of reaching out to our members who have been at the forefront, have adopted different ordinance provisions. Again, tried to talk to those who, like I said, actively learned more about these facilities. We had members who really were at the kind of the forefront and went down to Loudoun County, Virginia, which has kind of been a similar, I've heard that from a number of other municipal officials as well, to go to the international headquarters of where so many data centers are located to learn more about them, what they're like, and what types of issues and concerns it might have, what the pros are, what the cons are. And then tried to develop their ordinances with those thoughts in mind. Since then, it's really taken off, I guess, particularly in the last 6 to 8 months. And I know we've, again, tried to start out with just some webinars to, again, try to coordinate those who'd already done some work with those who hadn't, again, share experiences. And then in November, we also did some additional training and brought in, again, Basin commissions, different stakeholders, different attorneys to try to talk about, again, those who had experiences, but also get some perspective from the developer side as well.
Chairman, we've heard from two types of boroughs. Ones that are currently going through the development process, like in the Northeast. It's been particularly difficult in terms of providing information for the residents. I know that the state agencies have been helpful with coming out to do public hearings, and of course in that area they have adopted zoning amendments, and we've gone through that process, and following that. That's very helpful as well. Then we've heard also from other boroughs, which they don't have any. There are no proposals, there's nothing, but they want to make sure that they have planned for this use so they don't get caught unprepared. And so, it's just about trying to provide for responsible development, and the more information, the better.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the response from both of you. I'm just concerned about what gets put into the model ordinance, to be honest with you. And as I said before, the Commonwealth is so diverse. What may be needed in a model ordinance in southeastern Pennsylvania may not be needed in the Northwest, for example. So that one-size-fits-all approach is a concern to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll go next to the prime sponsor of the legislation, Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Fischel, you mentioned the association opposes any type of mandatory state-directed land use provisions. Could you just explain why you believe that HB 2151 falls under this category? Because the intent in writing this legislation was to make it optional and just as a tool. And even with, townships may have already passed ordinances, but as this evolves, the ordinances could evolve too, and amendments could be needed, in the near and the short and long term.
Certainly. And again, understand that was the intention, and there certainly recognize that there is optional language in there. Our concern is, one, you're putting it in the MPC, which is the regulatory oversight of land use and zoning, and there isn't similar language for other types of model ordinances you might need for, warehouses or solar fields or so many other land uses out there. So that was one of the concerns of it. Again, in putting it in the MPC, again, using the term model ordinance in the actual statute itself was concerning, of how it would be perceived, even again with the other with the optional language in it. Perhaps it's better to put it in a separate statute, creating statutes for the center or something like that, and perhaps looking at giving more broad-based authority, if it's not already there, to develop those types of ordinances.
Thank you, and I'd be happy to discuss that further with you.
Sure.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. DiOrio, I'd like to direct just a few questions to you very quickly. Can you generalize the states in the country that right now have the biggest planned or in progress build of data centers going on?
Certainly, Representative. The largest markets in the country, of course, are Virginia, which is the largest market globally, Texas, Georgia, Metro Atlanta is the fastest growing market. Texas has 3 to 4 very, very strong markets in Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio. You also have Arizona, Metro Phoenix, the greater Phoenix area. You also have, although it is a shrinking market, these are still considered some of the primary markets in the country, places like Illinois, Chicagoland area, California, mostly because of Silicon Valley. California is actually a really diminishing market. It's very difficult to develop there. You also have strong growing markets in places like Ohio as well. And so those are pretty much, I would say, kind of the leading markets in the country.
Thank you. Of those markets, what do you think they have all in common by way of a regulatory environment?
I think by way of a regulatory environment, they have an environment that fosters development, that is designed to attract data centers and bring them in and foster broader overall economic development as well, not just for data centers, but in a broader business community sense.
If I can narrow a subset of those states, the ones that are building hyperscale data centers, what are those states doing by way of electricity generation?
Those states, I would say Texas is probably the standard example for that, in which Texas is able to build generation quickly in a cooperative manner. I think that's key to understanding what makes a strong market. Other places like Phoenix and Metro Atlanta have vertically integrated markets, regulated markets, in which those utilities have conducted significant planning and are able to go through and have those plans in place to build the generation and transmission needed to serve what is growing electricity load.
So for those states that are not vertically integrated and building hyperscale generation to match hyperscale data centers, what does that regulatory environment look like?
That regulatory environment, again, I think is expedited permitting, streamlined permitting processes to enable this to get online quickly, recognizing different generation shortfalls. Again, I think I have of Texas back to having a central reliability authority in ERCOT, which is geographically contained. there's been significant investments over the last several years, including from the Texas Energy Fund, designed to build more generation to accommodate load growth across the board, both in population growth, but also manufacturing and other business sectors.
So to put that simply, would you agree with me that the regulatory and statutory environment for building new generation is one that is entirely favorable from the state level?
I would say that's accurate.
Thank you very much.
Representative Frio.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for our testifiers. I think this is a really interesting piece of legislation just because I'm going through this right now in my district. In the 26th district, we have 3 data centers proposed right in my backyard. And our community, East Vincent Township, which has been at the forefront of this for the last 6 months, has gone through many iterations of a ordinance, which has met with a lot of township meetings with pitchforks included, and have gone through this revision. So I think that the cost to townships from our solicitor for the multiple of revisions is not something that we should ignore. So any model that could get us to a place where we have options for townships that can lower that cost, that's obviously something that's attractive. Also, I noticed that we have a lot of real estate speculation. We have some real data center movement, but we have everybody with a piece of ground that has anything close to being able to put a data center on it is applying for a data center, which I think adds to the demand for speed to do something quickly. To your point, I think when we were talking from the borough point of view, speed is really important because these proposals are coming in, and if they come in before there's an ordinance, you're living with what you got, which is nothing, right? I do have some questions and concerns around who should be writing and stakeholder input into this. Is DCED, what's the mechanism they're going to use to help create this model ordinance? Are they the right partner in this? What's the role of DEP and other stakeholder groups? If you guys could all comment on who should be helping to write model ordinances and options, and why do you think DCED is the correct partner or not, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that DCED, Governor's Center for Local Government Services, they specialize in certainly giving our members resources and technical expertise. Recently, over the last 3 years, the governor and the General Assembly have made the decision to invest in more so of the planning side. So they do have expert planners on staff who I think would be a good fit for this task. I certainly think that DEP and some of the other, maybe PUC, would be good to have their input as well.
I'd say that, DCD and particularly the Governor's Center has historically had a role in land use and had some language, I think, put into the MPC back in 2000 when they did the amendments to the code to give them a role providing some planning assistance to municipalities. And historically, they had done a good bit of that and then had less funding available over the years, but they did do a good job with that role of, again, providing that planning assistance, serving as a resource, and providing different training tools too as well. I think they're certainly probably the best agency to do that role, and could certainly serve to work with DEP, with the basin commissions, with the other regulatory entities in gathering those, helping to gather those inputs. Again, we've been working. Those agencies are out there trying to share their expertise as well right now. Again, because speed, time is of the essence, and things have moved so quickly. But again, that would be appropriate.
I would say, agree with everything that was just said concerning DCED, and certainly there are other agencies that have, whether it's DEP, LNI, there are agencies that have experience with the public participation process. One thing, and it's why we're supportive of the amendment in particular, is making sure there's transparency around those stakeholders are involved, so that when we get to that final model ordinance, people understand how we reached that point. And I think that transparency is going to be very, very important for a number of stakeholders.
And I would just offer comments on the stakeholder side in particular, which is that, again, the industry here has decades of experience. When I think of Loudoun County, Virginia, obviously, or Prince William County, Virginia, and the ability to offer the real-world impacts of what the zoning ordinance requirements may be or recommendations may be in terms of setbacks, in terms of aesthetics, things like fenestration or other requirements that may go onto the land, what their practical impact may be, both on either the development side or how it may contribute to other concerns. If there's a significant amount of landscaping, things like that required, that may involve a significant more water use, and it's important to kind of consider those factors when it's all put together. On the speculation side, if I could just offer quick comments on that, because the industry shares that concern as well. And one of the things that we have been heavily engaged in is working with utilities on forecasting. How do they evaluate projects that come into their interconnection queue or that request interconnection? It's especially true, obviously, on the utility grid planning side to ensure that the investments are right-sized. And so we support, very much reasonable kind of barriers to entry into a marketplace. As leading data center owners and operators, we've been doing this for, a long time, heavily capitalized, able to bring these investments to fruition. And it is important that the infrastructure providers have the ability to then evaluate those projects accordingly. Commercial readiness criteria, et cetera. Are you achieving milestones so that it's true that this project is not speculative and that it is a project that will come to fruition? So we very much agree with you on that.
I'd like to just follow up on that point, because I think this is a critical point, because a lot of the speculation is also driving a lot of cost to our townships and municipalities, and sometimes unnecessarily without, even if it's appropriate siting criteria. Does the industry association have sort of model what's proper siting, what's needed, what those barriers to entry might be that would be appropriate, so that we can vet out the speculation that's not really valuable for our townships to go through this fast exercise, and what it would, what's that minimum standards look like to say this is a proper site or not? Mm-hmm. So do you have something that we could look at from the industry that we could understand how that would work?
The data center industry is a very diverse industry. It's not a monolithic industry by any means. There's various company sizes and structures, and so it's not easy, I think, to distill those all the way down to necessarily model requirements. I think we can offer insight on best practices. DCC has not put anything out as far as best practices or model legislation or ordinances, but I think we can bring a lot of expertise to bear. Again, most of that, I think, on the speculation side tends to come in the utility side of things, the electricity side of things, because the industry will work really heavily with economic development directors and local officials, at the front end to evaluate sites, submit plans, ensure that they have clear insight into what the permitting processes will be. Does this fit the needs of the community? So developers will actively do that on the front end as far as when they do their due diligence. And I think there could be some concerns that maybe some of those speculators aren't doing that due diligence. So I'd like to explore that maybe a little bit further as far as what we could do at the local level on some of those issues.
Thank you. We have just a few moments left and 2 more questions. We'll go to Representative Venkat first.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler, and thank you to the testifiers. 2 relatively quick questions. The first is for Ms. Fischel. You mentioned that this legislation you felt might be not needed anymore. Recently in Allegheny County, at my colleague's district, Representative Steele's district, there was quite a public kerfuffle about data centers, and one of the things that came out in those deliberations was that local municipalities saying that their existing zoning process wasn't meeting the moment, and that they feared litigation if they did not approved that proposal despite their misgivings. And so I'm curious, when you're talking about timeliness, and this is not a mandate legislation, if you can comment about the circumstances that are going on around the state, such as what has occurred in Allegheny County, and this question of whether we do need to act to at least have a model legislation.
I mean, again, things have been moving for well over a year in several of the areas. Again, the Northeast, I think, got hit first with the most amount of applications, but we've seen them in South Central, Southeast, Southwest. Heard talks of them in North Central potentially. So there's been a lot of areas where there have been interest. Again, I think the concern is there are some things out there now. Waiting another 6 months to put something together is probably not going to be timely as quickly as things have been moving, especially since this has been going on for, like I said, over a year at this point with the development. So again, the time thought that it was simply not be timely and that there are resources out there now. Could there be better use of those resources? I mean, absolutely trying to coordinate and certainly we're willing to work with the committee and anyone of how to better, coordinate what we have done, which is really coordinating what our members have done and sharing with those other members. I think could be helpful.
So I appreciate the answer. I don't think that the fact that our legislative process doesn't work as quickly as any of us would like should be serving as an excuse not to put forward model ordinance legislation, which I think actually benefits everyone involved. I'm supportive of this development. I think we should be seeing it. But this leads me to my second question, and this is directed at Mr. DiIorio, is that I appreciate the need for local decision-making, and I certainly support that. One of the challenges we are seeing as legislators and as this committee is the demand from large load customers, including data centers, that is creating a statewide challenge related to energy supply versus demand. And I certainly want to see more supply, but I think we also have to look at the demand side. And so isn't a model ordinance a relatively small step to recognize that this is not simply a local concern in isolation, but is part of an integrated statewide issue that does suggest that we need some type of model approach that localities can look at in their own context?
Representative, I would say I think the industry very much, agrees with that sentiment. I don't think we have any concerns about the model ordinance. I think we just want to ensure that the stakeholder process has a clear focus of balancing economic development with mitigating concerns, as well as having, again, a robust stakeholder process, because I think the industry can really bring to bear those real-world impacts of how this affects the development of the actual site and what the unintended consequences may be. So I don't think we disagree with with having a model ordinance. We just want to make sure that the process is robust, and we can have input on that and help form what is the best result.
Thank you so much. I see Mr. McDonnell. I don't know if you wanted to comment, or Mr. Grutza, if you wanted to
Yeah,
comment.
just, and it's your question. I think the nature of some of the questions, just reflecting on it, I think the way I'm thinking about this is purpose and process of this, right? Purpose being, yes, having a tool available for municipalities, but frankly, having a tool available for residents as they're looking at this, that they understand what are all of the things implicated. People are out there now reading about an energy use or a water use. And these model ordinances are tools that residents can look at and understand: noise, aesthetics, plantings, energy, water, all of these things together. So it serves a larger purpose. The other thing I'll share bluntly is we're still learning in our model ordinance. We keep updating our model ordinance as we learn more about noise, as we learn more about some of the water impacts. So I think having a starting point with a model ordinance that you can then continue to update as the technology changes or as we have different understandings of the variety of impacts is important. But Yeah, agree that it would be nice, would have been nice to have it 6 months later, but it's sort of the same thing as planting a tree. Best time was 20 years ago. Second best time is today.
Thank you. And our final question will come from Representative Pielli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question could be fielded by anyone, but I think it's probably best for Mr. DiOrio. You were mentioning stakeholders. Like Chairman Causer, I was once a township supervisor, and I'm very sensitive to local control over land use. And I know you mentioned different states that you've had development in, but I would doubt very much that you've ever encountered a Commonwealth like Pennsylvania. Even the Commonwealth of Virginia, my understanding is the lowest level of local control goes to countywide. So obviously here we have a different setup that has to be considered. And I think I see you saying that you don't have a problem with the model ordinance, but you've raised concerns about the input. I mean, wouldn't you agree that given that we're in Pennsylvania, that a state-led process that includes industry, municipalities, environmental groups, citizens, provide more predictability in the current patchwork of local rules emerging across the Commonwealth? I think one of the things that we have here is, it's been said many times, and we can't deny the fact, different townships, different municipalities were so varied throughout the Commonwealth that the approach in California, the approach in Virginia, is not really necessarily the best approach here for Pennsylvania.
Well, I think I would agree with that. You know, I think tools that can help guide that approach, and as you mentioned, you know, kind of patchwork and predictability, I think is key. And that's why I don't think, you know, the industry is not expressing concern with the model ordinance. We just want to make sure that, you know, the stakeholder process is robust, because I think we can provide guidelines that provide that predictability and that insight for how development may work across the Commonwealth, while also providing, you know, that degree of local control and local customization in order to fit their needs. So I would agree with that sentiment.
Thank you. And I have one quick question for Ms. Fischel. Ms. Fischel, I'm curious, this is an issue that's obviously been going on for a few years now. It's a very important issue. I was kind of taken aback by the language you used as mandatory land use, when we can all agree, correct, that there's nothing in this language that it makes it mandatory, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
By any chance, does PSATs have a model language, a model ordinance that they've been working on that they could present to us for consideration?
We don't have a model ordinance. We've been trying to collect from our members the ordinances that they have been putting in place, as well as with training resources and sharing those amongst our members. Again, with the thought that it's not necessarily one size fits all. There are different areas, different approaches you may be taking, and different considerations depending on what resources they have in those communities.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I do think it's important to emphasize, as Rep. Pielli said, that this legislation provides a resource, an optional resource. There is not a mandate in this bill. And then we have great respect for local elected officials and the work that they do in their communities. So thank you, Representative Donahue, for this bill. We look forward to working together, and thank you to the panelists. We will certainly be in touch as we work through this. We appreciate your time. We will now proceed to the second item on our agenda today, House Bill 2150. We'll take just a moment as the first panelists leave us. Thank you for staying, and we will welcome our new guests as well. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your time. Joining us is Representative Kyle Mullins, the prime sponsor of House Bill 2150. Representative, would you like to offer remarks before we begin?
Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Thank you very much for adopting me to your committee for the day. I will behave, and I very much appreciate both you and Chair Causer for this kind introduction and allowing me to say just a few things. In the last year, we've seen many data center proposals across the state. Both Representative Kyle Donahue and I represent Lackawanna County, where they've seen the highest one of the highest concentrations of data center interest in the country. And there's real concern and a sense of overwhelm among the people we represent. House Bill 2150 is an effort to gain a clearer understanding of this emerging industry. The people of Pennsylvania have serious concerns about data center energy usage and water usage, especially as they see utility bills continue to rise rapidly. Policymakers and members of the public deserve an accurate and up-to-date picture of what's happening and how conditions are continuing to change. Mr. DiOrio, in your last testimony, you mentioned being responsible and also responsive members of the community, and I appreciate that. And both of those things I tried, and I know we tried mightily in drafting this bill to include those very attributes, responsibility and responsiveness. The bill's about transparency and good governance, and it responds directly to the real and practical concerns we've heard from our neighbors about the cumulative impact, the cumulative effects, which must be considered, especially in high concentration areas like we are dealing with in Lackawanna County. This legislation will help to ensure that the growth in this sector is guided by facts, accountability, and the best interest of the people we're lucky enough to serve. So thank you, Chair Fiedler.
Thank you, Representative. In this panel, we also have 4 testifiers: Robert Ruth, the Pennsylvania Policy Director with NRDC, Andrew Dayhoff, Executive Director of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, Amy Brinton, Director of Government Affairs at the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, and again joining us is Dan DiOrio, Vice President for State Policy at the Data Center Coalition. Thank you, testifiers, for being here. I know our committee members have quite a few questions, so we will jump right into it. Mr. Ruth, if you would begin.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Chair Fiedler, and thanks to Chair Causer and honorable members of the committee for this opportunity. Again, I'm Robert Ruth. I am with NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I lead our climate and energy policy work here in Pennsylvania. House Bill 2150, introduced by Representative Mullins, is relatively brief, as is my written testimony, which you all have a copy of, so I will strive to be brief here as well. NRDC, we are supportive of House Bill 2150 and the straightforward reporting requirements that it would establish. The information collected by DEP and released annually in consultation with the PUC would enable policymakers and residents across Pennsylvania to better understand a rapidly growing industry that could potentially have significant cumulative impacts on water supplies and electric grid reliability for years to come. So I believe we are all aware of, or have at least heard about, the scale of these potential impacts by now. I did link in my testimony to a comprehensive white paper that NRDC released a few months ago with an analysis of data center related issues and recommendations for enacting responsible guardrails to effectively manage large load growth. I believe I circulated that to this group at the time. HB 2150 is one reasonable step to take among others. It's similar in nature to other reporting bills that have been introduced recently in other PJM states, such as Virginia, New Jersey, and Michigan, as well as at the federal level. So this is a growing trend among policymakers. Regular reporting and disclosure requirements on energy and water use will create pathways for accountability and fill a current information gap as these facilities develop. I'll note that Section 3E of the bill would protect data centers from public disclosure of any confidential proprietary information while ensuring that DEP and PUC report anonymized and aggregated information that details how data centers affect energy demand patterns, peak load stress on the grid, and overall water use. The bill also provides an opportunity for data centers to report on efficiency measures and demonstrate evolving industry best practices. By requiring disclosures on energy and water saving steps, waste heat reuse, and any increased adoption of additional deliverable clean electric generation and storage. The bill would create a modest incentive, not a mandate, for data centers to utilize cleaner technologies and more effective approaches. NRDC also supports Section 4B, directing that penalties collected for noncompliance with reporting requirements must be deposited into utilities' customer assistance programs to support low-income Pennsylvanians. This is a reasonable relationship between agency enforcement authority and energy affordability goals. So, stepping back, NRDC does not ideologically support or oppose data centers writ large. These facilities can support and spur economic growth, including through job creation, increased municipal tax revenue, and infrastructure investments. At the same time, they are poised to represent some of the largest industrial consumers of electricity and water. And right now, Pennsylvania lacks a systematic way to measure and sufficiently understand or anticipate relevant impacts associated with their operations. All stakeholders would be better positioned to make informed decisions rather than react to potentially unforeseen stresses on grid infrastructure or water resources. So, to sum up, this bill would advance a data-driven approach to energy policy and better allow for informed, proactive measures to protect consumers, the grid, and our climate. I am here to work with the committee and all stakeholders as this bill advances. We'll try and incorporate feedback and ensure that Pennsylvania positions itself as a leader in responsible energy and water resource management in the digital age. So, thank you again, and we'll look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Dayhoff, we'll go to you next, if you would.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler. Good morning, Chair Causer, members of the committee. I'm Andrew Dayhoff. I'm the Executive Director of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, or SRBC. SRBC is a water management agency formed by a compact between New York State, Maryland, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the federal government. A key aspect of our mission is managing the consumption of water to ensure sustainable operations during droughts and adequate flows to the Chesapeake Bay. The Susquehanna River drains about half of Pennsylvania, roughly in the middle part of the state. So why does a water agency care about data centers? I think you're aware, all data centers have two things in common: the need for power and the need for cooling technology to dissipate the tremendous amount of heat generated by the banks of computer processors running around the clock. A very efficient and cost-effective way to remove heat is to transfer it to water, and that has the result in evaporating a lot of water, or consuming it, as we call it, and as the title and content of House Bill 2150 refer to. It was reassuring to see that Representative Mullins and Bill's co-sponsors are aware of the potential water demand associated with data centers, because, to be honest, when news started breaking earlier last year about proposals for data centers, the articles almost always focused on power needs, land zoning, noise, and many other factors, all of which are very important, but often didn't mention water. Our fear was that the potential for large water demands was not widely understood, and that a lot of data centers would be built without an assessment of the availability of water or the potential impacts to local water resources. To be very clear, most facilities consume water, either for heat dissipation or other processes. I'm talking industrial and manufacturing plants, power plants, golf courses, food processing, fracking. And SRBC has a long track record of managing that consumption of water. So why the concern for data centers consuming water? It's based on a couple factors. First is the speed at which they're being proposed and the rapid timelines for construction. That can be a challenge in trying to determine if water is available and where it will come from. Second is the uncertain nature of the proposed water use. We're not sure how many data centers will ultimately be built, whether they'll be concentrated in certain areas, as seems likely, whether they'll be in close proximity to water sources or to other water users. And third is the variability of the water demand. Depending on the cooling technology selected, the water consumption can be completely under SRBC's permitting threshold of 20,000 gallons per day, or it can exceed 4 to 5 million gallons a day, which is more than most communities with public drinking water systems use, and on par with the new gas-fired power plant. Further complicating the picture is that the demand can vary over the course of the year. It can be lesser or almost non-existent in cooler months, but very high in hotter summer months when water demand is at peak everywhere. I'll add another concern here that's tangential to data centers. Because of the high demand for electricity, it's likely new power plants will be needed for the data centers. As I alluded to earlier, power plants also need cooling, and many of them also rely on evaporating water as well. In fact, power production is the #1 consumer of water in the Susquehanna drainage area by far. Hopefully I've made the point that water use needs to be one of the priority considerations associated with proposed data centers. SRBC has a distinct role there and a lot of relevant experience, so I'd like to share a few final points. Regulatory considerations. As with any other water user, a data center consuming a large quantity of water will need to go through our permitting process. Our states do not have oversight over the consumption of water, so it falls to us. We are encouraging potential developers to meet with our regulatory staff early and often. The importance of monitoring. Any data centers that do receive a consumption permit will be required to measure water use and report it to us so we can ensure compliance with regulations and maintain awareness of how much water is being used. Measuring and tracking water usage is also critical to long-term management and planning efforts. Management needs. Because our role is to manage the sustainable consumption of water, we have developed tools that provide information on what areas of our region have good water availability and what areas may be prone to water shortages or conflicts. And water conservation. Again, because we're tasked with managing sustainable water consumption, we've developed incentives to promote the use of technologies and methods that recycle and reuse water or otherwise minimize water consumption, and that would also include targeting usage to water sources of poor water quality, such as former coal mines. In closing, successful development of data centers, and I define success as minimal disruption to community water supplies and local water resources and avoidance of water conflicts, will require wise siting, early coordination, disclosure of water needs, and balancing water and power needs with economic and ecosystem constraints. SRBC looks forward to being a source of information and offering continued sustainable development of our shared water resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayoff. Thank you for being here. Ms. Brinton, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here before you today. Representative Mullins, thank you for your work on the issue. We greatly appreciate it. My name is Amy Brinton. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. We represent nearly 12,000 members across all sectors of the business community in Pennsylvania. This includes the data center industry, as well as a number of resources that are impacted that we're talking here today. So water, wastewater, energy, a number are our members at the PA Chamber. Appreciate the opportunity to comment. I have my written testimony that I submitted. I'll be giving you just a brief overview of my comments in recognizing time constraints. But know that the PA Chamber supports thoughtful, long-term planning for data center development and responsible planning. However, the bill is currently written, House Bill 2150. We do have significant concerns. Our first concern is the targeting of a single industry. House Bill 2150 imposes reporting only on data center despite other industries having equal or greater energy and water demand. This creates a competitive disadvantage and sends a signal that Pennsylvania is more restrictive than other states. And we've heard in the previous panel all of those other states where we're looking at having competition for this economic opportunity. Other states are actively offering incentives, and this bill could deter AI and data center investment here in Pennsylvania. A second concern would be where the data should reside. The bill directs reporting to DEP, whose mission primarily is enforcement. Housing sensitive operational data with an enforcement agency sometimes creates an unintentional long sword, which could later be used for enforcement. We recommend moving the responsibilities in this bill to the IFO, the Independent Fiscal Office, a neutral analytic agency with no permitting enforcement authority. Thirdly, the duplication of existing reporting. Most data centers already disclose extensive sustainability information via CSR and ESG reporting. House Bill 2150 would duplicate existing reporting, create new internal burdens, and provide little new insight for the Commonwealth. Security and confidentiality risks. House Bill 2150 requires a highly granular operational data, energy by source, peak load, cooling methods, water use, on-site generation, future demand projections, etc. Many centers support national security, financial systems, law enforcement, hospitals, and corporate infrastructure. This detailed data could allow cyber or physical bad actors to identify vulnerabilities. Anonymization, and don't ask me to say that again, I probably will screw that one up, does not eliminate risk, especially in regions with few facilities. And lastly, the penalties, proposed $10,000 a day penalty, we feel is disproportionate for a reporting-only violation. Many reasonable circumstances could cause unintentional non-compliance, and penalties could reach hundreds of thousands of dollars without any environmental harm or intent. So overall, as drafted, House Bill 2150 risks chilling data and AI investment in Pennsylvania, creating security vulnerabilities, duplicating reporting systems, and driving development to other states. Therefore, the PA Chamber would urge an approach of balancing this transparency with competitiveness and security concerns in mind. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. DiOrio.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler and Chair Causer, and members of the committee. Again, for the record, Dan DiOrio, Vice President of State Policy for the Data Center Coalition, National Membership Association for the Data Center Industry. I'd like to thank Rep. Mullins for his interest in this issue and your willingness to engage with the industry. We very much appreciate that. We do have concerns that House Bill 2150, while well-intentioned, imposes disparate, burdensome, and potentially duplicative reporting obligations for detailed and sensitive information on the data center industry, while ultimately not informing the overall energy and water use throughout the Pennsylvania economy. We're concerned that the legislation may introduce considerable friction into Pennsylvania's growing data center market, and it risks shifting data center investment to other states that do not single out the data center industry in such a manner. I want to provide some brief background. Again, this was in my written testimony provided, but as was mentioned, the servers, IT equipment, and other hardware housed in a data center generate a significant amount of heat. That heat is not dissipated, the equipment can overheat and ultimately fail, which leads to vast and costly disruptions to critical services that we all rely on every day. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for cooling. The best approach depends on local factors such as water stress analysis, humidity, climate, temperature, and the availability of water, including recycled, non-potable, or reclaimed sources. Cooling data centers involves inherent trade-offs. Air cooling tends towards higher energy use, electricity use, while liquid and evaporative methods typically require more water but less electricity. Selecting a cooling technology, therefore, becomes a matter of balancing energy consumption and water usage. And the industry itself is moving away from direct evaporative cooling and is moving towards and has actively deployed in most new data center designs that are being built today, closed-loop cooling systems. Some are using direct-to-chip cooling systems. Some are using liquid immersion cooling, all of which are extremely water efficient. Data centers are just one of several industrial water users throughout the economy, yet they are one of the most efficient. According to Bluefield Research, data centers use an estimated 39 billion gallons of water per year in 2025, so BGY. While semiconductor manufacturing use 59 billion gallons per year, 59 BGY, and food and beverage use 533 BGY, and an estimated 2,500 BGY was lost to utility water leakage, which is a pretty telling stat. Moreover, data centers are highly incentivized on the energy side to operate as efficiently as possible. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, energy costs can be as much as 40 to 80% of operating costs for data centers on an annual basis. So apart from meeting sustainability commitments, data center companies strive to maximize energy efficiency to keep their costs low, but also their costs low for their customers. So specifically on HB 2150, requiring data centers to report on the address and nature or purpose of each facility is very concerning, particularly if competitors and foreign adversaries can access that information. Limiting disclosure obligations to data centers provides little probative information or value. A December 2024 report by Virginia's Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission noted, for example, that 83% of data centers in Virginia, again, the world's largest data center market, use the same amount of water or less than an average large office building in 2023. Further, it said that data center water use is sustainable, and the state ensures future sustainability through regulation. By requiring disclosure of water use by data centers only, the state will not have visibility or comparative information around water use of other commercial and industrial facilities. This raises important questions regarding the utility of this data, how it will be contextualized, and how it has any probative value informing policymakers and others. For example, if a community lacks insight into the context of how various commercial and industrial users consume water, There are risks it may deny the user that discloses in favor of a larger water user where information is not disclosed or available. Further, data center owners, operators, and tenants use a variety of different measurements for tracking resource use that may not be easily applicable to the standards outlined in the bill. Additionally, the level of granular detail may not be possible under current metering practices. In the case of data centers where space and capacity are leased out to one or more tenants, a data center owner may not have access to information regarding energy use and would either have to rely on individual tenants to disclose or potentially breach contractual confidentiality provisions. Given the critical nature of some computer workloads, tenants that are engaged in national security and other sensitive areas may not be able to lease space in Pennsylvania data centers if disclosure of sensitive information is required. As an alternative, we recommend that Pennsylvania seek to collect and access useful and actionable information by all large commercial and industrial customers. In doing so, it would be helpful to understand what information is already available before imposing new requirements on end users who choose to invest in Pennsylvania. We suggest the state engages with utilities and other energy and water providers to determine what extent they are able to provide anonymized information regarding data centers and other users who they serve. DCC strongly urges the committee to seek collaborative solutions with relevant state and local agencies, utilities, and other energy and water providers, and large commercial and industrial customers. Again, we're committed to being a responsible and responsive partner with Pennsylvania and engaged in collaborative partner with policymakers across the state. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. DiOrio, if I could just ask you one clarifying question. My understanding from what you said and your testimony is that you are not necessarily opposed to providing some or all of this information. Rather, your concern is the agency to which it's reported and the importance of confidentiality. Obviously some of this information, as you said, is reported to various utilities and other places. What is your suggestion, I guess? I would be interested to know for how you would like that done. You suggested, perhaps gathering it from all the disparate places to which it's already reported. I think my concern would be, how do we get all of this information in a single place, obviously keeping it confidential, and make it useful if we were to collect it? And so my concern is that if we are trying to gather it from all the different places to which it's already reported, that important piece might be lost, the usefulness part.
Yes, again, I would say that, as others on the panel have mentioned, many of this information is going to be required at that level to determine, the capability of the system to actually provide the service to the facility. I think rather than have the end user, I think the state should work with those energy and water providers already that will have this information to report it to the state. There are in cases where, especially on the utility side for energy, they should be able to provide at least, kind of a total picture of data center load within their system and ultimately what that energy use was over the last annual year. So I think it's a question of determining what information is out there and available, how it can be gathered, and then how ultimately it should be gathered, which agency at the state level could gather it, anonymize it. And again, I think it would have to come, or we would stress that it should come from all large commercial and industrial users. Because ultimately, if only one sector of the economy, one end user is singled out, you won't have information as to how the overall system is being used throughout the state. And so I think there's information out there. We should seek to better understand what's already available for asking for duplicative requirements or anything like that, and especially in which an end user may not have it in a form that is directly prescribed under this bill. And again, I think we have concerns about the metering requirements as well. I've heard from my members that, especially on the water side, they aren't metered in this manner. And so collecting that information, especially on such a granular level, may not actually be possible, at least from the end user perspective.
Thank you for that. Mr. Ruth, you characterized 2150 as a straightforward reporting bill. Could you talk about your feelings on that specific point, and also on, some folks have suggested that requiring reporting could discourage investment. And my understanding is that you have looked into how transparency can actually assist markets in planning infrastructure upgrades and in the end, kind of moving things along. Could you talk to that point, please?
Certainly. I mean, and that's a great characterization of it. This is about obtaining objective, relevant information that can be useful for all stakeholders, regulators, grid operators, utilities, municipalities. So I think that I can understand the industry perspective on the tension between transparency and economic development, but the other side of the coin is just that the better, more accurate information that we have, in the case of an evolving, significant industry like this, there are opportunities to make improvements, including evolving industry best practices. There is an opportunity and a requirement in this for data centers to disclose improvements that have been made year over year. And just to note, this is a bill that would require the reporting of information about operations, ongoing operations at data centers. It's not a precondition to apply for a license or a permit to operate in Pennsylvania. I think I've seen other jurisdictions that have structured a reporting bill in such a manner. And in terms of the adjective straightforward, I think there are a limited number of criteria that are being asked about here. And, I would be interested to hear more about the Data Center Coalition's perspective on the difficulty of obtaining some of the reporting that is being required in this bill, and hourly energy usage during times of peak load. I'd be interested in trying to work through that because NRDC, we were not involved in drafting this legislation, and this is my first chance to get it to hear different perspectives on ways that the bill could be improved. But I think it's a straightforward reporting requirement bill because it seeks a limited amount of, again, objective, relevant information that can help all stakeholders.
Thank you for that. Chairman Causer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm struggling to understand why we would put this regulatory burden on a single industry in Pennsylvania. And the thing that I keep thinking about is when the unconventional gas industry came to Pennsylvania, there was a flood of legislation and regulation and taxes, and you know what I mean? The focus really went to this new industry that was here, and remains. There still remains a lot of focus on that particular industry, but that was an industry that in many ways in this building was singled out. Now the common thing seems to be data centers, and people want to rush to regulate, tax, you name it, with data centers. Mr. Ruth, in your testimony, you actually reference pathways for accountability, which in this building, to me, triggers regulation, taxes, things of that nature. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to flesh out your thoughts on, that statement, pathway to accountability, as it pertains to reporting electric and water usage.
Sure. So thank you for the question. Again, the more accurate information that we have being reported from a significant developing industry, the better opportunity we have from regulators, decision makers like those in the General Assembly, to enact policies to protect Pennsylvanians. I am aware of other pieces of legislation where the reporting requirements are not strictly limited to data centers, or as data centers are defined in this bill, but there is a minimum megawatt size threshold applied. So it's interesting to me that you draw the parallel between the fracking industry and data centers here in Pennsylvania. You could do an analysis of the economic development that has resulted for the people of Pennsylvania. You could take a look at the environmental and consumer impacts that have come along since the fracking boom in the mid-2000s. So I think that accountability is a part of state government, whether that's through legislation or regulation by the agencies. It's all done in the public interest. So I don't mean anything pejorative by that term with respect to data centers or data center development here in Pennsylvania.
I use the unconventional gas industry as an example of an industry that was targeted with regulations and taxes and things of that nature. I bring up this because this bill is targeting the data center industry, and it's requiring reporting to a regulatory agency, which is also a big red flag because that regulatory industry has nothing to do with keeping data on water usage or electricity usage. So it's a significant concern. I guess my question to Mr. DiOrio is, looking at other states, do you see any kind of reporting requirement like this in other states?
We have not. As Mr. Was it Ruth? Yeah, as Mr. Ruth has pointed out, there is legislation out there. But to my knowledge, no legislation has been passed. The most recent legislation was in New Jersey, and that was vetoed by the governor with expressing many of the similar concerns. There also was an ongoing study provision in New Jersey that he recommended be completed before instituting legal reporting requirements.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the testifiers. Ms. Brinton, you argue that data centers are being unfairly singled out, but given their uniquely concentrated and growing energy and water demands, why shouldn't policymakers have specific, sector-specific data? And given those potential impacts of this industry, doesn't it make sense for policymakers to get an accurate picture of the industry's growth and its impacts and how that growth and its impacts are changing over time?
I would agree 100%. However, the bill just applies to data centers. And to Chair Causer's point, it should be a more broad, if we're looking at requiring anything, it should be more broadly looked at as opposed to one single industry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to follow up Mr. DiOrio on some of the questions by Chairman Causer, because I think we heard reference to New Jersey and Michigan, and yet New Jersey and Michigan were not on your list of states doing work right now in hyperscale data centers. They were Virginia, Texas, Georgia, Arizona, Illinois, and Ohio. I'm leaving California off because that is a regulatory and energy nightmare. My question is very similar to the chairman's, which is, how many of those states who are successfully developing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of data centers in those states have a regulation like this that singles out one industry?
To my knowledge, none.
And if we were drawing an economic development, setting aside just for a moment the environmental piece, which I don't set aside lightly, we will come back to that in some form, but it would be applicable across the entire Commonwealth, across the entire industry of economic development, to include the Southeast with its fracking, or I'm sorry, with its refining. But as a matter of economic development policy, is a targeted regulation to an industry an incentive or a disincentive to coming to our Commonwealth?
I think it would be a disincentive for many of the reasons I outlined. Again, I think it's a disparate and potentially burdensome reporting requirement. I think it's based potentially on misinformation or misunderstanding, misperception of data center water use. Ultimately, the industry is, again, amongst the most efficient water users out there. The inherent trade-offs between energy and water use, and ultimately, I do think, even though there are confidentiality provisions in the bill, I do want to stress again that data centers provide critical services. And the disclosure of potentially confidential and sensitive information is very, very problematic and very concerning. The Department of Homeland Security actually weighed in on a Virginia reporting bill last year, and then ultimately that bill was not advanced because of those reporting requirements and the concerns expressed. So I do think that it could have serve as a disincentive to future development in the state.
And Virginia leads the world in terms of data center development.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative McAndrew, did you have a question? Okay, go ahead, please.
Excuse me. Mr. Dayoff, you explain, Mr. Dayoff, can you explain that hyperscale data centers can rival municipalities in daily water consumption? How would consistent statewide reporting improve early coordination between developers, water suppliers, and the Basin Commission before shortages emerge?
What was that last part? Shortages?
Yes. How would consistent statewide reporting improve early coordination between developers, water suppliers, and Basin Commissions before shortages emerge?
It's critical in terms of the cumulative impact. You know, what else is happening in an area where a data center or any water user, for that matter, is developing. If Mr. DiOrio alluded to a water provider, if that's a public utility or a local municipality, they have long-term planning that they need to take into consideration and how they're going to provide water to their other customers. For data centers in particular, it's kind of like fracking in a way in that their water usage can be so variable. It can be, like I said, minimal in the winter when it's cold, like now. They just open the windows. Or in the summer, it can be very high. That's unusual for a water utility to have a customer like that. You know, a household manufacturing facility is much more consistent across the year. So that would be very important in how they factor into whether they can accommodate that and how they serve all their customers. On the flip side, there could be instances where a data center is not in close proximity to a local water utility and will have to self-source through groundwater wells or withdrawal from the river or a creek. And it's critical that management agencies understand what that demand pattern looks like so that they can assess, will that creek be able to handle that peak demand in a dry summer month? So that, you know, those are kind of the things that are at play and why the variability and uncertainty is of a concern to us.
Thank you. Final question of the day will come from Representative Kale. You may go ahead.
Do I need to be quick?
You may go ahead.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much.
I'll try and keep it brief. As an attorney and a legislator, that can be tough sometimes, you know. But Mr. DiOrio, I'd like to direct this at you, but it really can be for anybody. I come from an area that has had some exciting developments in the last 15, 20 years. The southern part of my district is really the heart of the Marcellus Shale play. There's a lot of natural gas exploration happening there. In the northern part of my district, there was a $14 billion petrochemical plant that Shell built. And now we are hearing a lot about data centers. There's a couple of major developments, one with Vistra and Meta, where they're upgrading our infrastructure, and then also at the Bruce Mansfield site, there's talk about converting a coal-fired plant into a natural gas plant and then leveling the rest of it and having a data center there. So exciting stuff, but I want to caution you, or just basically just give you a little bit of perspective of what's happening on the ground there. And I understand why these bills are being presented. I truly do. I'm not saying that they're the right thing to do. I'm not saying that I'm going to vote for these bills, but I understand it because I'm hearing on the ground right now from my constituents. And having the natural gas industry in my area and having the petrochemical industry in my area, I can also tell you now I'm seeing it again. My constituents are being inundated with propaganda. I don't know what's real. They don't know what's real. There's all kinds of information coming that is very negative on data centers, and some of it is also positive. And to sift through this information and to really understand what the benefits are and what the legitimate concerns are is difficult. And as their legislator, it's incumbent on me to understand that. And so I would just encourage you and your members to really invest in education, to help local constituencies understand what is coming. And I would actually ask that you could take us, a group of legislators, to Virginia to understand kind of what we're in for with this development that's coming down the line. But one thing that has been consistent that I have seen is the tie with data centers and energy production and energy usage. And there's real concern because we have not been building gas plants or coal plants in Pennsylvania over the course of the last number of years for various policy reasons that we don't need to dive into right now because that would be a much longer conversation. But Where are we right now in Pennsylvania from the standpoint of capturing this opportunity with data centers as it relates to electricity production? And where do we need to be? I understand that this bill requires you to report on these things, and I'm not interested in really getting into too much of that, but I am interested in understanding how much more demand, how much more supply is the data center demand going to take from the grid, and how do we best prepare for it?
Thank you very much for the question, Representative. And yes, I'd be more than happy to see if we can arrange something in Northern Virginia. Be happy to do that. I know many of our members would be eager to show off the technological advancements that they have, especially with energy and water use. You know, with regard to where Pennsylvania is as a market first, Pennsylvania is a really strong and growing market. And I think my members in particular have identified it as a really great opportunity. There's a number of factors that go into that. One, of course, I think is energy availability. I also think it's looking out at future supply. Obviously, PJM has issues with that, and the industry is also working on those unique partnerships, as you mentioned, in order to address some of those short-term constraints that may be on the grid. While nothing, I think, ultimately replaces the long-term build-out of the grid. As far as data center energy demand, that demand is demand from consumers and businesses for digital infrastructure. The estimates that I've seen from McKinsey is 80 gigawatts by 2030. That's up from 25 gigawatts in 2024. So the demands are significant. Again, those demands are coming from every sector of the economy. They're coming from us, 21 connected devices in the homes. So the energy demand will be significant. I do think it's an opportunity to reinvest in the grid after about 20 years, 2 decades of flat load growth. We have several new growth factors. Data centers are one. We also know manufacturing is another, electrification, hydrogen production. So I think prudent and long-term investments in the grid are really what is necessary right now. I think the data center industry is helping to very much provide that demand signal for investment in the grid. I will say, as an industry, we are committed to paying our full cost of service for that electricity. We want to ensure that costs are allocated appropriately. We want to ensure that ratepayers are protected from stranded assets, which is why we've been engaged at PJM. We've been engaged with the PUC here, developing model tariffs and finding ways to provide those long-term, signals of reliability for the industry to know what the terms are going to be, while also providing utility safeguards to ensure costs are allocated appropriately. So that's a very long and rambling answer to your question. I'm not an attorney, but I still have the
You have more credibility than in my eyes in that case. I can say that being an attorney. So.
Thank you both so much. Thank you to all of our testifiers. Thank you to the bill sponsors who joined us. Thank you to the committee members and to Chairman Causer. As I said in the beginning, I believe our job as lawmakers on this committee is to work to keep down the energy bills that are skyrocketing for people back home. We need to make sure we have a reliable grid as much as possible, and we need to put in place reasonable regulations and guardrails that keep families, workers, and the environment safe. That is the work we are doing, and I am grateful to all of you for your time and thoughts on the matter. Chairman Causer, any closing comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to thank the sponsors of these bills for bringing them up for consideration, and also the testifiers for the information that they've presented. Certainly gives us a lot of information to consider going forward, and thank you all very much.
Thank you. This meeting of the House Energy Committee is adjourned at 11:40.